Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
You can tell a lot about where a company is going by looking at where it's been. ConocoPhillips, Alaska's oil and gas company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for Saturday's show. On the advisory map here, or the warning, watch, and advisory chart, winter weather advisories out here for the eastern North Slope, Brooks Range area, as well as the eastern Arctic coast there, Kaktovik, Barter Island, and those areas for tonight for continued windy conditions and snow, blowing snow, reducing visibilities down to a half mile at times with winds gusting to 40 and even 45 miles per hour. Same thing going on here along the Alaska Range. That out tonight and into tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning, with expecting some possible wind gusts as high as 40 miles an hour, and the snow sort of backed up here right along the Alaska Range on the north side could reduce visibilities in this entire area. Then down here, the yellow area there, that's a high wind watch out for Juneau and the Douglas area for starting tomorrow night and extending through Monday morning. Northeast winds could possibly gust as high as 60 miles an hour during that period. On yesterday's satellite imagery, we still had this huge area of upper high pressure covering the central eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula there, producing the mild temperatures, and that had pushed the jet stream up into the Bering Sea, and westerly flow bringing a lot of cloudiness and some at least areas of lighter snow and colder temperatures coming in as well behind that, especially in the upper levels. Cleared out over the southeast coast, and you can see this area here starting to slip on down in toward the northeast Gulf of Alaska. Today, kind of more of a north to south or northwest to southeast track of those clouds. The jet stream now reoriented itself. It's south of the area and kind of extends back up like this into this huge mass of moisture here that's more or less going to stay out in the western Aleutian areas. Not a bad day here over the eastern Aleutians, but you can see frontal remnants here coming across the Alaska Peninsula, clearing out over Bristol Bay up into the southwest interior. But a lot of low moisture here, low-level clouds, stratocumulus, some flurries here across all of the northern Bering Sea areas, but pretty light and inland, and some areas of snow, again, backed up along the Alaska Range on the west side, right up into, well, all the way around and down into toward Delta Junction, and then some areas of light snow back up over the central and northeast interior, and then a lot more wind up along the eastern Arctic coast with gusts 45 miles an hour. In fact, pretty windy conditions the entire stretch of the coastline there, and that wind flow coming in off still fairly open waters, at least the concentration's still under 50%, just about open still through this area, but enough moisture and heat flux coming through the ice for those winds as they cross that area to pick up enough moisture. That brings bands of snow and clouds to produce IFR conditions at times here along the western Arctic coast, and then that sweeps eastward, and then behind each one of those surges it breaks out to VFR, so kind of very marginal conditions up there or changeable conditions up along the western Arctic coast. And then on the chart here, again, high pressure extending back up into the Russian Far East here, down into the southeast Bering Sea, and even Bristol Bay, and of course that offshore flow making for nice conditions there. Low pressure over the eastern Gulf of Alaska. Northwest winds gusting 30 to 40 miles an hour there at Kodiak Island, pretty windy conditions up to, let's see, Seward had gusts of 45 miles an hour, and about the same at Whittier, except those winds were west. Very windy conditions, just about seeing storm force wind gusts at Middleton Island this afternoon, and pretty breezy in toward Cordova, as well as Valdez here. You can see the gradient is tighter, and that moisture, that this low pressure area, some of that came down from the northeast, and another upper trough with a even colder air mass is going to be dropping down tomorrow late and into the next day, and that will pick those winds up over the northern areas of the southeast coast. Tonight this will slip into Dixon Entrance, so the heaviest precipitation of either snow or rain and snow mixed will be down, of course, down toward these southern areas like Klawock on over to Ketchikan. Drier conditions, northeast winds, some cases gusting 45 or even 50 miles an hour in the channeled areas up here to the north. And so that's going to tend to keep these snow showers along and off the coast into the Gulf of Alaska. No change, south central Alaska, still cold, and again, those gusty winds continuing in the windy areas. Snow backed up along the north side of the Alaska Range into the Tanana Valley, a break, and a couple more troughs still skirting across the Arctic coast and north slope. This system out there really not making much progress to the east, but it will over the next couple of days. The main low center will begin to slide off to the southeast, and the front will stay sort of hung up along the Aleutians with moisture field ever advancing slowly toward Nikolsky, but the winds will be from east to west there, so it'll be a real slow movement. High pressure holding here over the Bering Sea, and again a lot more moisture for some areas of snow or flurries here into the interior, along with marginal to IFR conditions possible in the Tanana Valley. Again, right back up along the Alaska Range. VFR and dry with mostly clear skies to the south. Kodiak Island about like today, but a little less wind. And this low finally starting to pull inland there tomorrow afternoon. High pressure back to the north and still windy along the North Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle, Skagway, Lynn Canal, and those areas. Stephen Passage looking pretty windy. Snow and blowing snow up along the Arctic coast. Outlook for Monday. Weak low here develops and drops southward again, and then up to the north another trough positions itself and is ready to smack down on the Arctic coast there, with probably see a break though in advance of that, so conditions will begin to deteriorate, especially around the Barrow area with some moisture, and then that'll sweep southward across the area Monday night. Got this system coming across the Russian Far East, and the warm front could spread some light snows, fog, a lot of low clouds, and really bring the ceilings and visibilities down here along the southwest coast, but not a lot of wind with it. High pressure keeping winds light and variable over the southern Bering, or over the northern Bering Sea, and actually right up into the Chukchi. Not much in the way of wind. All the wind will be up here along the, well, from about Barrow eastward to Demarcation Point. A lot of rain over the Aleutians continuing with gusty east winds, possibly minimum gales at times through this entire area. And then some of this warm front action could bring a little moisture into the Nikolsky and Unalaska area. And quite cold air now dropping into Bristol Bay, so that could pick up some moisture. And on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula there, anywhere on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, could see cloudiness and some light snow at times. While snow showers could be on the moderate side here, especially up toward Yakutat to Cordova. But again, most of the moisture will remain off the coast there. So the northern Panhandle looking pretty good. Just watch for those increase in the winds Monday night, or tomorrow night, and into Monday here with a high pressure aloft and lower pressure on down to the south. Temperatures this afternoon at 4 p.m., 31 degrees down at Klawock, 35 in Net. Sitka had a little bit of snow, 33 degrees, 26 in Juneau, the 28 both at Wrangell, and Elfin Cove, about the same, upper 20s here all along the North Gulf Coast. Much cooler inland, just 8 degrees at Golcana, Talkeetna, 11, 19 at Wasilla. They had a little bit of a northerly breeze there. 30 degrees at Homer, 34 Kodiak. Up in the Tanana Valley, lower to mid-teens up there with Delta Junction and a little bit of light snow with 13. 3 degrees at Eagle, 1 above over at Fort Yukon. Cold spot, Bettles, -3. 7 at Anatuvik, and the wind, snow, and clouds, temperatures mostly in the teens here along the Arctic coast. 9 degrees at Nuiqsut, one of the cooler areas. Teens, lower 20s here, northwest part of the state, but just 5 at Selawik. Teens, Nome, to 20s, upper 20s over St. Lawrence Island, and 20s, lower 30s here over the southwest interior. McGrath, 21 degrees and still some light snow in the area there, as well as over at Sparrowvon with sleet mute at 25. 26 at Bethel. King Salmon, 31 degrees. 34 at Kodiak and Pilot Point. Still near 40 here, just barely reaching 40 at along the Alaska Peninsula. The warm spot at 4 o'clock was 45 degrees here at Adak, and St. Paul had 36. Lows tonight, well below zero here over the eastern interior. Some areas into the 20 to 25 below range here over the Yukon Flats in some areas, and below zero conditions back to the west, and then pretty chilly all the way down into Bristol Bay with St. Paul forecast low at freezing, and quite cold here over the northern panhandle, teens, lower teens to lower 20s down to the south. Highs for tomorrow. Below zero up here over the eastern interior, all the way down to the Copper River Basin, or at least down toward North Wyandotte. Otherwise, milder south of the mountains, and then milder yet up along the coast, but still only mid to upper 20s, 35 for Kodiak, and quite chilly over the southeast coast. Mid 20s, St. Lawrence Island, upper 30s over the Pribilofs. Warmest areas will be out in the Aleutians with lower to mid 40s for the highs. Flying weather, good VFR again, south of the Alaska Range with the low stuff banked up on the northern slopes there with some possible IFR anywhere in the central and eastern Tanana Valley, a little bit to the north. A lot of IFR up there over the north slope, Brooks Range, Arctic coast, back around in across Kotzebue Sound and the Chukchi Sea. VFR in the south side of the Seward Peninsula, a lot of VFR here over the southwest interior. Could be some lower stuff along St. Lawrence Island, the Yukon Delta coast to Nunivak Island, and IFR out to the west. Passes, Anatuvik, IFR, about the same forecast for Adigan as well, IFR conditions at times there. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, lowest conditions will be on both western entrances, possibly as low as IFR on Merrill Pass on the west side. Same thing for Rainy, low conditions on the western sides, better to the east and through the pass. And windy, that same forecast, IFR possible on the northern entrance, otherwise open. Isabel, also this pattern, IFR north entrance, VFR south, lowest conditions on the north side of Mentasta as well. Tanita, wide open on both sides. Portage, wide open as well. Good VFR, again, for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels here tomorrow morning, cutting across the northern Bering Sea, then dropping now south of Kodiak Island and staying into Dixon Entrance. Still the remnants of that warm air with a high pressure aloft out here over this central Aleutian southern Bering. Icing threats, really the only chances, in fact, these shaded areas, just a slight chance of some trace rime icing. Better chances out here below 12,000 feet over the western Aleutians in a deeper moisture layer. Tomorrow's jet stream, northwest winds right out of Russia here, cutting across Bristol Bay up to 100 knots, south of the area now, so colder air continuing to filter in. This upper low expected to track southward into the Copper River Basin Monday and Tuesday with higher pressure back out to the west. And at 9,000 feet, northerly winds 20 to 25 knots, a little brisker here along the southeast coast, strongest up along the eastern Arctic coast there with 40-knot winds, lighter with high pressure over the eastern Bering Sea. East-southeasterlies 40 to 45 over the Aleutians. Southern Bering Sea Aleutians, pretty strong westerlies just about the entire length of the area there. Lighter winds, high pressure, gusty westerlies there over the eastern Arctic coast. Northerlies 15 to 20, stronger over the northeast the northeast Gulf, and turbulence, moderate chop at times here for the North Slope and Arctic coast, as well as some mechanical turbulence along the North Gulf coast down to Kodiak Island. Pretty good here in the west, and then more turbulence out farther in the Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Coming up on Destination Tomorrow, see how solar sails are being developed for deep space exploration. We'll also see how NASA technology is being used to help protect some of America's most important documents. Plus, we'll take a look at how the next generation of reusable launch vehicles is being developed. And Johnny Alonso finds out exactly how GPS works. All this and more next on Destination Tomorrow.
Hello everyone, I'm Steele McGonigal.
And I'm Kara O'Brien. Welcome to Destination Tomorrow.
This program will uncover how past, present, and future research is creating today's knowledge to answer the questions and solve the challenges of tomorrow.
Up first, we look at a new way for spacecraft to travel to distant destinations. New lightweight solar sails might soon become the standard mechanism to power spacecraft. These reflective structures use energy from the sun rather than rocket power to move through space.
These sails are not only less expensive than current rocket-powered spacecraft, but can potentially be 4 to 6 times faster. This increased speed and cost savings could change the way we study deep space.
Jennifer Pulley spoke with Dr. Keith Belvin at NASA Langley Research Center to find out more.
Throughout humankind's early history, the quest for greater knowledge and understanding fueled the need for exploration. For centuries, the vehicle most early explorers used to achieve this exploration was a ship with sails. But because these ships depended on wind pushing against the sails for forward motion, they were generally very slow, unpredictable, and often very dangerous. Today, with the multitude of ways that humans now possess to travel, the sail, with all of its limitations, has been relegated to recreational status rather than a serious tool for exploration.
But a new idea might change the way we think about sails. NASA researchers are actually developing a new type of sail that will use the sun's light to propel spacecraft deep into space. These solar sails are so promising that someday they may replace slower, more costly propulsion systems for deep space exploration. I spoke with Dr. Keith Belvin at NASA Langley Research Center to find out more.
Well, the idea for solar sails has been around for a very long time. Maxwell, back in 1873, predicted the existence of solar pressure lights. So we've known about solar pressure for a long time, but it wasn't until recently that we were able to build solar sails with the lightweight materials and structures that are needed.
Tell me about these lightweight materials and structures. How are they being used?
Well, the key to building a solar sail is, of course, to make it very large and very lightweight. For a useful solar sail, it has to have a weight of less than 10 grams per square meter. For example, copier paper has a weight of 70 grams per square meter. So we're talking about some materials that are much lighter than that. One of the things that NASA's done over the last decade is to work on materials that can be processed to just a couple microns. That's a couple millionths of a meter thick. And these lightweight, thin materials then are made space durable so they can withstand the radiation and temperatures of space.
Dr. Belvin, tell me how a solar sail works.
The basic principle is much like a ship on the sea that uses sails to capture the wind.
The sun is constantly emitting light, or photons, in all directions. Since the photons have mass and are in motion, their momentum produces a pressure when reflected by a surface. When a spacecraft uses a solar sail for propulsion, the sail's reflective surface transfers a continuous force from the photons to propel the craft through space, much like a sailing ship uses wind to push it across the water. Since the pressure being emitted from the photons is very low, the force is small. But because the sail will have a constant source of energy, it is continuously accelerating and can reach speeds upwards of 155,000 miles per hour. This speed could cut years off travel time during long-duration interstellar flights. In addition, the constant propulsive force provided by the sun's light allows the spacecraft to travel in orbits that are not affordable using conventional propulsion.
So can solar sails be used on all types of missions?
Well, in addition to solar sails having to be lightweight for various missions, the spacecraft they're propelling has to be very lightweight. But there are many missions where, with the miniaturization of electronics, that the spacecraft science sensors are very small and lightweight. And those systems are very amenable to being propelled by a solar sail. For example, we're looking at missions in the future where we do interstellar transfer of science instruments using solar sails.
So do we see solar sails only being used in deep space?
Well, there are missions where solar sails can be used close to the Earth's orbit. They don't all have to be long-duration interstellar type missions. The constant acceleration that a solar sail produces gives it an orbit trajectory that is not achievable by some other means. For example, we can fly a science payload to measure the magnetic storms emanating from the sun.
How do you deploy such a large structure into space?
To deploy a solar sail in space is quite a challenge. First of all, the sail has to be packaged in a small size to fit into the launch vehicles. Near-term sail missions are on the order of 70 meters to up to 150 meters in size. And so it's a real challenge to package those tightly and then deploy in space. Two aspects probably are most important for deploying a solar sail. The first is deploying the booms that hold the membranes in place. We're using inflation to push the booms out and to the right location, and then we cool the booms to rigidize them. The second aspect is deploying the sail, the thin film membranes that we've talked about. Those will incorporate ripstop so that if there's a small tear, it doesn't propagate very far. In addition, we have to deploy those so that we don't affect the sail's reflective performance. And so special measures are taken to maintain the integrity of that sail.
What is the future of this program?
I would say within the next dozen years or so, solar sails will be used routinely to propel spacecraft. Continual improvements in the sail technology will allow them to be used for extreme environments like near-sun missions. Over the next 20 years, most importantly, we'll have the technology in hand to do interstellar missions. These are kilometer-sized solar sails that weigh only 1 to 2 grams per square meter. The technology being developed today at NASA is going to enable us to unlock a lot of the secrets of the universe. Not only will we be able to look at distant places using telescopes, we'll actually be able to send science instruments to some of those locations using solar sails.
Researchers at NASA are continuing to improve the materials used for solar sails every day, making them stronger and lighter. Coming up, we find out how some NASA detective work helped preserve the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution. But first, did you know that the inspiration for solar sail technology came from the 17th century astronomer Johannes Kepler? Kepler deduced that winds blew objects around in space after he observed comet tails blown by what appeared to be a solar breeze. Kepler suggested that eventually ships might navigate through space using sails that could catch this wind.
Welcome back. Small craft advisories here over the northern areas. North to northeast winds up to 25. Gale force gusts here. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, down into Stevens Passage. Much like today, Eldred Rock, at one point I saw where they had 45 knots. See that again tonight and tomorrow. More northeast on the direction down to the south and lighter winds along the south coast. For Monday, about the same on the direction and speeds here, but again, storm force gusts possible here over the northern inside water areas and higher gusts all the way down, but the winds generally lighter with less of a gradient down to the south. For the North Gulf Coast, northerlies about 20 knots across the Barren Islands, northwesterlies 30 to 35 knots, so there could be some gale force winds at times through this area tonight and tomorrow. Lighter winds, say about 20, so it looks like winds will be in a diminishing mode here across Kodiak Island back up into Shelikof Strait. And then the outlook for Monday, again, that same pattern, northwesterlies 25 to 35 knots at times, and actually heavy freezing spray also through these areas along with higher gusts. Prince William Sound, call it north for the mid-sound, but quite variable as you get up toward the coastal areas here from Passage Canal back around to the east, and light winds, Cook Inlet, especially on the north of the Forelands, and then picking up to about 20 knots down to the south. Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, northeast 20 knots tomorrow. North at about 20 to 22 knots here southwest of Kodiak Island. And for Monday, light winds now for Bristol Bay, just barely a breeze out of the northeast, still 20 knots here across the peninsula. Northerlies at about 15 there from Sitkinak over to Sand Point. And for the eastern Aleutians, 20 to 30 knot winds from the east in all these areas. Northeast winds at about 30 knots here for the central Aleutians from Adak westward all the way out to Shemya with 13-foot seas. And then for Monday, still small craft advisories in this area, maybe a slightly bit lighter out to the west, but 25 to 30 knots becoming east here over the central Aleutians, Fox Islands, southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 7 to 9, maybe 10 feet. And for the Bering Sea here, for the Pribilofs, northeast at 20 tomorrow, north 15 on the coast, southwest coast. Pretty light winds now for St. Lawrence Island, northwest 10 knots, northern Bering Sea pretty light, and then high pressure right through here extending in toward the coast. So light westerlies over the top. St. Lawrence Island just light and variable. So that warm front that's going to be sliding southeastward through here is not going to have much wind at all associated with it. Northeast winds 10 to 15 from Kuskokwim Bay out across the Pribilofs. Up to the north on the Arctic coast, northwest 20 to 25 to maybe westerly for the Chukchi Sea, and then westerlies 20 to 25, higher gusts on the east side. And for Monday, winds become northeast 10 to 15 knots here on the western coast all the way down to the Shishmaref area or Tin City, Bering Strait, and then northwest 15 on the central coast, but on the increase again, strongest winds 30 knots, maybe gusts as high as 40 or more over toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. And for tonight, you can see a couple of troughs crossing the Arctic coast there, bringing periods of snow, blowing snow. Winter weather advisories up here for the eastern areas from the Brooks Range, again, up to the eastern Arctic coast there for snow, blowing snow and visibilities under a mile. And that same sort of thing going on, but to a lesser extent here over the eastern Alaska range. Gusty winds, cold, chilly night. Again, in the channeled areas, Seward could see gusts to 40 miles an hour again. This low sliding eastward, and more snow dropping down from the north with colder temperatures into Monday. And here's that warm front bringing some snow into the west.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.